We investigated fraud at the precinct level in conventions all over South Houston. In particular, I worked on Senate District 6, 11, 13, and 17. But I worked with the Hickeys on investigating fraud at the precinct levels in all of the precincts. Truthfully speaking, ours was like a bulk of evidence, and I'll go into that just real briefly, and they will provide you with evidence. But quoting from the rules of the Texas Democratic Party, in order to participate in the precinct, a person to participate in the precinct convention must reside in that precinct, and they must have voted in the Democratic primary that day in order to participate. At the precinct level, the chair calls for the qualified members to sign in on this sign-in sheet. It asks for their name, address, email address, voter certificate registration, phone number, and other questions. So to be legal, they must go through those steps, having voted that day and showing up at the precinct in which they live, filling out this form and signing it in their signature. According to the New York Times, Monday, July 21st, 2008, the votes for Hillary by popular vote in Texas were 1,459,000. The votes for Obama were 1,358,000. So Hillary obtained 51% of the votes in Texas. The popular vote, Obama only obtained 47.4%. So as a scientist and as a mathematician, I was curious as the results came in from the precincts, and the precinct caucuses did not reflect those numbers. So I could see something was wrong because the precinct caucuses did not reflect the popular vote. Hillary Clinton campaign paid to have copies of every one of these sign-in sheets. These arrived in box after box after box. It would fill a normal size room. So what all of us did is we laboriously went through each of the sign-in sheets to see if they were properly filled out. Put in either the person's name, their address, or their certificate number, and it will give all the information to see if they're truly registered in the precinct. So we went through these sign-in sheets, and many, many, many Obama people either came to the wrong precinct, they did not sign in properly, they did not show ID, or they had not voted that day. When you come to the precincts, the number of delegates selected is by a mathematical formula, and how it boils down is the one who gets the most people there gets the most delegates. That's the bottom line. And how they determine the delegates is on these sign-in sheets. So when so many people were registered illegally for Obama, they obtained a lion's portion of the delegates, and then it percolated up. So they had illegal delegates at the precinct level, who then went on to the Senate district level, who went on to the state level. And that's how they control the delegate count. And they may win Texas through control of these precinct sign-in sheets where people signed in illegally. I personally went over, I cannot tell you how many sheets vetting the people on there. I personally did it.
How many days did it take you?
I worked from 8 in the evening until 4 in the morning for 2 weeks. Because see, we only had, caucuses were held on March 4th, and then the Senate district meetings were on March 29th. So we only had, and it took us a few days to get the copies. So essentially we only had 2 weeks to go over them.
There was actually some analysis that myself and several others were doing where we were actually checking just the basic math on the sign-in sheets, where Linda was actually describing that it's the number of people that were supporting one candidate and the number of people that were supporting the other candidate. Well, unfortunately, in several precincts, we found that even the basic math wasn't done correctly. And so delegates were incorrectly given to one candidate or the other.
We have the numbers, we don't have to follow the rules because we're going to inundate the process, and we have the numbers, and you may say these are the rules and stand up and say this is how it's going to be done. Well, we have 5 times as many people as you have, so we're going to say, sorry, we don't have to follow the rules. And that's what happened at each successive level.
So I think the strategy was to bring in a huge number of people, overwhelm the system, and in the chaos that ensued, they could steal the election. That is my personal opinion.
Texas tells us a lot about this election because it was by far the largest state that tried to do caucuses. And the question about caucuses has always been: are they legitimate? Do they reflect the will of the people? The way Texas awards delegates is that 2/3 of delegates come from the popular vote, and about 1/3 of the delegates are awarded at neighborhood caucuses. Hillary won the popular vote by about 4%, but ended up losing the caucuses by 10%. So there's this huge 14-point swing between what Hillary should have won in a normal state and what she got in neighborhood caucuses in Texas.
What that really means is that these caucuses, their voters, the small number of voters, are going to be able to literally have such a grossly disproportionate power in selecting the overall nominee.
Probably the worst thing that we saw in Indiana was parents coming into the office saying that the Gary Public School System had bused their children to Crown Point, Indiana, to vote in the election. And that was great. That's a great civics lesson. But if children were being told to go to the polls and vote for Obama, in which they were, then parents were livid. They were outraged, and they wanted to know what could be done about this. And so they brought in an actual slate of candidates that each student had been given to take them to the polls to vote for Mr. Obama and his slate. That was atrocious, because what lesson in civics were the kids learning that day? What? Win by any means necessary? Because the right to vote is a sacred vote in America, so how could we take school children, bust them on a school day, tell them who to vote for, then pay for their lunch and dismiss them from school early on taxpayer money? So yes, the voter fraud was rampant in Gary.
They blocked the doors, practically literally blocked the doors. It's like there were a lot more Obama people at the front door, Hillary people were in the back. They would not let them in.
I'd forgotten my voter registration card, so I went back home to get it, thinking that I needed it. When I came back to Armstrong, the doors were locked. There were a lot of people outside. I couldn't get up to the door. If I would not have been with my mom and with Alice earlier, I wouldn't have known to, try to push past the crowd and get in. Because we were locked and outside, and everybody's just looking at everyone like, what do we do?
This is what it is. They have manipulated the system. They knew exactly how to do it, and they knew how to corrupt the process.
When I took a look, after being on the credentials committee and looking at all the caucuses, I thought, does this really matter? Does it even make an impact? And I looked at something on CNN and looked at the map and counted up about how many delegates were coming from the caucuses, and it's approximately 670. So it mattered. Of that 2118, 670 of those came pretty much from caucuses. So if you cheated, that's why he had the delegate lead. Why do you think he wanted a caucus in Michigan? Because we can cheat at caucuses. That's exactly why I wanted one.
The poll records, including the ballots, sign-in sheets, or roll call poll, shall be retained by the county or the senatorial district chair as part of the official files of the convention for at least 6 months. Such records shall be open to public inspection at reasonable hours upon request. And yesterday I went because I wanted to make sure what I say here is, exactly right. The office was open, there were people in there, and I asked to see if I could, look at all the sign-in sheets and any tabulated results, if there was any report generated after the county convention, and they did not have anything. The person there told me that everything is with Mary Beans, probably in her house, where it's not supposed to be.
By about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock on election day, all hell broke loose.